I knew something was off the second I saw the bulldozer roll past my driveway. It was a crisp Saturday morning, and I was sipping my coffee on the porch of the house I'd owned for 13 years. That's when I saw it bright yellow, loud as sin, and heading straight for the empty lot next to mine. Except it wasn't exactly their lot. It was mine, or at least part of it. I'm Silas Brody. I'm a plumber by trade, own my own business, and I've never been one to stir up trouble, but I also don't take kindly to being walked on, especially not by a woman like Karren Bellamy. Karren was the president of our HOA, and she fit the role like a glove. Mid-50s, always had her nose up in the air like the world owed her something, and she treated the HOA like her personal kingdom. Her house was already the biggest one on the block, but apparently that wasn't enough for her. "Karren," I called out, marching across the street toward the construction site. She was wearing heels on gravel and barking orders at a poor young contractor who looked like he regretted waking up that morning. She turned, sunglasses sliding down her nose. "Oh, Silas. Can I help you with something?" "Yeah, you can tell me why your guys are digging up a section of my land," she scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous, we had the property lines verified. This is my lot. It was approved by the HOA," I laughed short and sharp. "Karren, I've had my survey done twice since I moved in. That oak tree they just took out, that was 10 feet onto my property." She waved a manicured hand like I was a mosquito. "Then sue me." And that's when I knew she had something to hide. She didn't deny it. She didn't even argue. She just told me to sue her, so I did. But before that, I got my ducks in a row. I went down to the county clerk's office and pulled every plat map, every permit, and every document tied to the property lines. I even hired a licensed surveyor again. He confirmed what I already knew. Karren had built over 17 feet into my lot, and it wasn't just a patio or a fence. It was part of the foundation of the new guest wing she was adding to her already gaudy mansion. I kept quiet. Let her keep building. The contractors poured concrete, framed the walls, installed the windows. Every bit of it deeper into my property. Then I filed the lawsuit. Quietly, cleanly, with a real estate attorney my cousin referred me to. We served her one morning while she was hosting an HOA meeting on her front lawn. "You've got to be kidding me," she hissed, reading the papers. "This is harassment." "No," I said. "This is called taking back what's mine, the best part, all the neighbors watching from their porches, whispering." For once, I wasn't the one under HOA scrutiny, she was. And that was just the beginning. The legal gears turned slowly, but I wasn't in any rush. Karren had built her arrogance into concrete, and now it was just a matter of time before it all cracked. A week after the papers were served, she tried to spin the situation during a community update she hosted on the clubhouse lawn. She brought out folding chairs, had her husband pass around lemonade like it was summer camp, and stood under a pop-up tent with a wireless mic like she was running for office. "Some of you may have heard rumors," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "But I want to assure you, everything happening on my property is within full compliance of our community guidelines. Unfortunately, there are individuals who are confused about boundaries, literal and otherwise." I didn't bother going. I had no interest in playing along with her performance. But my neighbor, Donna, recorded the whole thing and sent it to me that evening. "She's calling you territorial without naming names," Donna said, "but everyone knows who she's talking about. Half the street rolled their eyes." That was good to hear. I knew Karren would try to twist the narrative, but I didn't expect the neighborhood to be that quick to see through her. Still, it wasn't enough to rely on public opinion. I needed hard evidence, and I needed it all airtight, so I took it a step further. I filed a motion for an injunction to halt construction until the property dispute was resolved. My lawyer, Miss DeGarmo, was sharp mid-30s, no nonsense, and had a way of making her points so clear the judge barely had to think twice. She got the emergency hearing scheduled 2 days after filing. We showed up to the county courthouse at 8 in the morning. Karren arrived 10 minutes late, wearing some kind of designer suit and dragging her contractor along like a prop. The poor guy looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. Judge McClellan didn't waste time. "Mr. Brody," he said, "you're claiming the defendant's construction extends onto your deeded property. You say you've had it resurveyed to confirm this." "Yes, Your Honor," I said, handing over a thick folder with the surveyor's report, time-stamped photos, and the original plats from the county archive. Karren leaned toward the judge. "Your Honor, this is a simple misinterpretation. The HOA approved the plans. If there was an error, it's clerical at most." "The HOA isn't a legal boundary authority, ma'am," McClellan said, flipping through the documents. "And this isn't a few inches. Looks like 17 feet according to these." Her face twitched. He turned to her contractor. "Did you verify the property lines before commencement?" The guy looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We were told it was taken care of by the client and the HOA. We were given the go-ahead." "And you didn't confirm it independently?" "No, sir." The judge nodded slowly, then turned back to me. "Injunction granted. Construction is to stop immediately. Any further development will be considered trespassing and subject to penalty." Karren didn't say a word. She just stared at the wall like she was trying to burn a hole through it. Outside the courthouse, she caught up to me on the steps. "This is petty," she said. "You're blowing this out of proportion over a sliver of land." 17 feet isn't a sliver," I said. "And you knew it wasn't yours when you started pouring concrete. You're just mad someone called you on it. You have no idea who you're messing with." "I think I do," I said, "and I think you've gotten away with a lot more than this." That was the moment I saw the brief flicker of panic. She wasn't worried about just my case. There was something else under the surface, something bigger. I started digging, not literally. But I went back through HOA newsletters, permit applications, community development plans. I found 2 instances where the HOA had approved minor easement changes for other board members' properties. Both were rubber-stamped without signatures from the required city office. One of them even involved a drainage modification that had flooded the backyard of a young couple down the street last spring, and the HOA blamed them for landscaping improperly. I brought it to Miss DeGarmo. "This isn't just about your land," she said, flipping through the documents. "This looks like a pattern. Abuse of authority, falsified approvals. If this goes deeper, we might be looking at municipal fraud." She filed a request to subpoena HOA meeting minutes, financial records, and permit correspondence. That's when things got interesting. Turns out, Karren had been pushing through her own property expansion under the guise of a community beautification initiative. She had reclassified her guest wing addition as a shared event space on the permit form to bypass square footage limits. And she'd used HOA funds, yes, the dues we all paid for parts of the construction. It wasn't just theft. It was embezzlement. Miss DeGarmo turned everything over to the district attorney's office. The DA didn't hesitate. They opened a formal investigation, and within a week, 2 county investigators showed up at the HOA office, converted from what used to be a pool house, and walked out with 3 boxes of files. Karren wasn't there that day. She was already trying to lawyer up. The next HOA meeting was unlike anything I'd seen. It was standing room only. The usual crowd, who mostly showed up to argue about mailbox paint colors, were now holding printed emails and receipts. People were angry, not just at her, but at the whole board. When Karren walked in, people went silent. She stood at the front with a clipboard like she still had a shred of control. "If we can come to order, save it," said Mr. Delgado, who had lived on the corner lot for 20 years. "You stole from us." She opened her mouth, but he cut her off. "I've got the invoices. You labeled your foundation poor as community sidewalk repairs. There's no sidewalk there." A woman near the back shouted, "Where's the money for the security cameras we voted on last year?" "You said the funds were allocated." Another voice, "You made us pay special assessment fees for landscaping. Now I find out some of that went to your retaining wall." It snowballed. People weren't just mad, they were done. Donna stood up and called for a vote of no confidence. Someone seconded it. Hands went up across the room. Karren froze. She looked around like the walls were closing in. For the first time, she had no script, no fallback. Just a room full of neighbors ready to burn her paper empire to the ground. She left before the vote even finished, pushing past people without a word. 2 days later, an announcement came from the DA's office. Formal charges of misuse of HOA funds, falsification of legal documents, and unlawful construction. She was arrested that evening. The contractors removed everything that had been built past the property line. The guest wing was torn down piece by piece, down to the rebar. She tried to sell the house, but the scandal sunk the value like a stone. No one wanted to live in a place with that kind of history. Eventually, it sat empty, just a hollow shell with a reputation. The HOA held a new election. This time we did it right. Transparent voting, open books, and term limits. Donna was elected president. Mr. Delgado took over finance. People started talking to one another again, not just about bylaws or trash pickup, but about things that mattered. The fear was gone, so was the arrogance. As for me, I got my land back, every inch of it. But more than that, I got to watch the neighborhood rebuild itself on foundations that actually belonged to us. 2 months after Karren's arrest, things in the neighborhood had settled into something resembling normal. The kind of normal where folks waved again, where kids rode their bikes without being told to dismount near the clubhouse, and where people stopped flinching when they got mail from the HOA. But I wasn't finished. My case had started as a battle over 17 feet of soil, but it had unearthed something bigger, a rot that had been spreading through the board for years. Now that the top had been torn off, I wanted to make sure no one ever sealed it shut again. The district attorney's office had begun formal proceedings, but the deeper they got, the more tangled things became. Turns out, Karren hadn't been acting alone. At the next public hearing, the investigator from the DA's office presented findings that included falsified invoices, backdated approvals, and a shell landscaping company registered under the name of her nephew who lived 2 states away and had never set foot in our zip code. That company had provided services for over $25,000 in HOA funds across 3 years. Not a single one of those services had actually occurred. Donna, now HOA president, called an emergency meeting in the community center, this time with 2 uniformed officers present and a representative from the county auditor's office seated at the front. Every seat was filled. "Let's be clear," said the auditor, a square-shouldered woman with a clipboard and sharp glasses. "This isn't just about mismanagement. This is financial misconduct involving public trust. Your dues were used to funnel money into fake entities. That's criminal fraud. People weren't just watching anymore, they were asking questions, real ones. Can we recover the stolen funds?" asked Mr. Patel, who had lived in the neighborhood longer than anyone and always kept to himself. "We're working on a restitution order," the auditor replied. "But we need full records. Some of the documents were destroyed." That got a reaction, because now it wasn't just theft, it was obstruction. I raised my hand and stood up. "There's a storage unit," I said. "Karren mentioned it once during a board meeting last year. Said it held archived HOA records. I think she was hiding something there." The officers exchanged a glance. One of them took notes. "Where?" he asked. I gave the location. "A climate-controlled unit on the edge of town, registered under the HOA's name but never disclosed in any budgets or newsletters." I only remembered because I'd overheard her bragging once about how organized she kept things off-site. At the time, I thought it was just another ego trip. The next morning, the police executed a warrant. What they found inside wasn't just financial records, it was damning. Dozens of envelopes stuffed with HOA dues in cash. Receipts for extravagant dinners in the city filed under board training expenses. And worst of all, a folder titled Noise Complaints Internal Use Only, which contained printed email threads between board members discussing how to fabricate violations against specific homeowners. They didn't like including a disabled veteran who had requested a wheelchair ramp. and was denied approval 5 times under bogus aesthetic standards. The veteran's daughter, a nurse named Talia who lived 2 streets over, broke down when she saw the evidence. She'd spent months trying to get that ramp installed before her father passed away. Now she knew why it had been blocked. They wanted him gone, she said through clenched teeth. He didn't fit the image. The DA added charges of discrimination and harassment to the list. 3 former board members were arrested within days. One tried to flee to another state, but was caught at a gas station after his license plate pinged from a highway camera. Another tried to claim she'd been coerced and didn't understand what she was signing. The investigators found her signature on 5 separate fraudulent approvals. With the arrests came headlines. Local news vans started parking near the median. Some residents were embarrassed by the attention, but most felt vindicated. They finally had proof that the years of petty fines, strange rejections, and impossible standards weren't just overzealous rule enforcement, they were targeted campaigns. And through it all, I kept quiet. Not out of fear, but because I knew the wheels of justice were finally grinding in the right direction until I got a letter. It was hand-delivered in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a single page. You should have stayed out of it. No signature, no threats. Just that one line, typed in a bold serif font. I brought it to the investigator handling the case. She took it seriously. "We believe someone else might be involved," she said. "Someone who hasn't been named yet." She asked if anyone else on the board had been especially close to Karren, someone who'd managed to stay out of the spotlight so far. I gave her a name, Gregory Miles. He'd been the HOA's treasurer for the past 6 years. Quiet, kept his head down, never argued at meetings. People assumed he was harmless. But now that I thought about it, none of the fraudulent checks could have cleared without his signature. 2 days later, he vanished. His house sat dark. His mailbox overflowed. His phone went straight to voicemail. The police issued a warrant, and when they entered the home, they found his laptop wiped, his safe empty, and a suitcase missing. But they also found something else. A ledger he hadn't managed to destroy. It was handwritten, tucked behind insulation in the garage. Inside were names, dates, and amounts payments made to board members and, in some cases, to residents willing to report their neighbors for made-up violations in exchange for waived dues. It went back over 4 years. The DA held a press conference the next morning. "This is no longer a case of petty corruption," she said. "This is organized fraud, discrimination, and conspiracy to defraud a community of its rights and resources." They issued a statewide alert for Gregory Miles. His bank accounts were frozen, his assets seized. And the HOA, now under interim management by a third-party oversight committee, began the process of rebuilding from scratch with legal supervision. But amid all the chaos, there was one thing left to settle: the property line. The court had ruled in my favor, but the damage Karren caused, ripping out my trees, destroying my native garden, laying down foundation and tearing it back up, had left a scar across the side of my lot. I filed a civil suit for restitution, and this time, Donna and the new board voted unanimously to support the claim. Karren, now awaiting trial, was forced to liquidate one of her investment properties to cover the settlement. I used the money to restore the land, replant native shrubs, and install a long stone path that ran along the boundary lined with solar lights and a small iron plaque at the center. It read, "Property of S. Brody, protected by truth." People stopped by to look at it. Some left notes. Others just nodded and kept walking. But the message was clear. No one would forget what happened, and no one would let it happen again. One evening, as I was watering the new plants, Donna came by with a folded letter. "This was addressed to you but sent to the HOA," she said, handing it over. I opened it. It was from the county planning department. A notice of commendation for exposing widespread permit fraud and helping initiate reforms that would tighten oversight of private residential associations across the county. At the bottom, a handwritten note: Your vigilance made this possible, thank you. I folded it quietly and tucked it into my pocket. The neighborhood had changed, not just on paper but in spirit. People greeted each other differently now, with respect instead of suspicion. The fences still stood, but the walls had come down, and the 17 feet they tried to steal. That was the ground we built something better on. A light drizzle tapped against my garage roof as I stood beneath the overhang, watching the new sod take root where the guest wing had once been. The stone path was finished, the trees replanted, and the spot that had endured months of jackhammering and trenching finally looked like part of my property again. Not a scar in sight, at least, not a visible one. The neighborhood had changed for the better. But the story hadn't reached its final chapter yet. 2 weeks after the county's commendation letter arrived, I got a call from investigator Lena Durant with the district attorney's office. Her tone was clipped, but I caught a thread of urgency under the surface. "We need to talk," she said. "Something new has come up." We met in her office the next morning. A manila folder sat unopened on her desk. She motioned for me to sit. "Did you ever notice construction deliveries being made to the HOA's maintenance shed, the one behind the pool deck?" I frowned. "Not lately. It's been locked up since they started the investigation." She opened the folder and slid a series of photographs toward me. The first showed pallets of concrete mix. The second, industrial-grade insulation. The third, a shipping manifest for a diesel generator with the HOA's address as the delivery point. "This is from 6 months ago," she said. "Before your case, but during the period we now know the board was funneling funds through shell vendors." I leaned forward. "What were they using all that for? The maintenance shed isn't even wired for power." "That's what we're about to find out," she said, standing. "We have a warrant. You're welcome to come with us." The shed in question sat behind the now disused pool, hidden from the street by a thick hedge of overgrown juniper. It had always been padlocked and ignored, dismissed as storage for fertilizer or broken tools. But as we approached, I noticed something new. A vent installed near the base facing the ground. One of the officers used bolt cutters to snap the lock. The door swung open with a groan. Inside, the air was thick with dust and a faint chemical tang. Shelves lined the walls, but they were mostly empty. The floor, however, told a different story. A plywood hatch sat in the center, framed with new metal brackets and bolted shut. Durant crouched beside it, using a crowbar to pry it loose. The hatch gave way with a loud crack, revealing a staircase made of concrete blocks descending into darkness. We descended carefully, flashlights cutting through the gloom. At the bottom was a bunker no other word fit. The walls were reinforced with steel mesh, and the room was outfitted with a small desk, an air filtration system, a backup generator, and a half-assembled server rack. Boxes of sealed electronics sat unopened. A single chair faced a monitor connected to a hard drive. Durant turned to me with a grim expression. "This isn't just fraud anymore. This is evidence concealment, possibly even data laundering." She called in a forensic tech team. Within hours, they'd recovered files from the hard drive files that blew the case wide open. It turned out that Karren and Gregory had been logging resident data surveillance footage, financial records, even private emails scraped from unsecured networks. The HOA had access to the community Wi-Fi system, and they'd used it to quietly collect data from residents who logged into the network through the clubhouse or pool access point. What they were doing with the data wasn't entirely clear yet, but one thing was: it was illegal. Massively so. The county filed new charges within 48 hours: digital privacy violations, unauthorized surveillance, and willful destruction of public trust assets. The charges moved the case from county to federal jurisdiction. The FBI arrived the following week. Agents combed through every remaining HOA record, seized the server equipment, and interviewed contractors who'd unwittingly installed the bunker under the guise of stormproof document storage. Most of them had no idea what they'd helped build. Then came the biggest twist of all. A document recovered from the server linked a private real estate development firm to the HOA board. The firm, based 3 towns over, had been in quiet talks with Karren to purchase foreclosed properties in the neighborhood at below-market prices properties that mysteriously went into foreclosure after repeated HOA violations and fines bankrupted the owners. It was a manufactured collapse. They were targeting long-time residents, cornering them with fines until they fell behind on dues, then pushing foreclosure proceedings through the board. Once the homes cleared, the firm bought them for pennies on the dollar. 8 homes had been taken this way. Now it was a RICO case. Racketeering, wire fraud, data theft, conspiracy, and real estate manipulation all under the umbrella of an HOA that was supposed to serve its residents. The federal prosecutor took over immediately. Karren's bail was revoked. Gregory was finally tracked down in Arizona, living under a fake name. He was arrested at a small airport trying to board a private plane with a briefcase full of cash and a fake passport. The neighborhood held its breath as the federal trial loomed. But they didn't wait idly. Donna worked with the Oversight Committee to overhaul the HOA's charter. Every line was rewritten. No more closed-door meetings, no funds spent without 3 signatures. Resident appeals were now mandatory for any fine over $50. And most importantly, no board member could serve more than 1 term. I didn't run for office. I didn't need to. My part had been played, and now it was time for the community to take the reins. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers, communication records, contractor testimonies. The real estate firm's CEO turned state's witness, revealing the full scope of the deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. Karren was convicted on all counts. So was Gregory. 3 other board members took plea deals. Sentences ranged from 7 to 20 years, depending on involvement. The restitution fund, ordered by the court, totaled over $2 million. It would take years to fully distribute, but for the first time, residents knew they'd get something back, not just money, but peace. After the sentencing, I found myself outside the courthouse, standing beside Donna and a few other neighbors. The air was heavy with rain, but no one moved. "You think it'll last?" someone asked. Donna looked at me. "Depends on whether people stay involved." "Power only hides when no one's watching," I nodded. "Then we keep watching." That night I walked my property line. The lights along the stone path glowed faintly in the mist. I stopped at the plaque in the center, brushed a leaf from its edge. It wasn't just a boundary marker anymore. It was a reminder of what happens when people forget who really owns a neighborhood, of what one voice backed by truth and persistence can do when it refuses to back down, and of how a stolen 17 feet had brought justice to an entire community.